Well, I want to introduce to you Gavin McKiernan, who is the National Grassroots Director of the Parents Television Council, which is an advocacy group dedicated to protecting children from graphic sex, violence, and profanity on TV and in other media. He directs a network of more than 6,000 volunteers and trains local leaders for grassroots chapters across the country. Welcome to the Lisa Wexler Show, Gavin. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Sure. Now, I actually got on my high horse yesterday when I read Brian Stetzer's article in the New York Times, in which Parents Television Council was prominently featured as going after MTV. So I took it upon myself to download the trailer video after reading the article, and I was very, very dismayed. I really am, because I think that this is in a piece. This is just one glaring example, but there are many, many, many examples of children younger and younger being sexploited, if you will, on our television screens. I understand today Fox News is reporting that you want Congress to do something about it. Can you explain?
Well, what this show we feel has crossed another line that is rare, if ever crossed. That possibly it may have crossed the line into child pornography, and part of the reason for that is not just the content, and also that it's partly because of the way it's been marketed to youth, but also because in a lot of these shows, or most of them, you have young-looking 20-somethings who play the parts. But in this show, at least half of the main cast is under 18, and the oldest is 19 or 20 years old. So they are shooting 15-year-olds naked and in sexual nature, and so they're shooting that and then distributing that, and so they may be in more trouble than just having their sponsors pull off and having a show that they may have to cancel.
Okay, so that's, you know what, that's very interesting. And part of the article that I read said that even if MTV decides not to air all the footage, they could be in trouble legally for actually shooting the footage to begin with.
Yeah, definitely, and if they're in possession, you don't have to hold a viewing party or show other people if you are in possession of, and even worse, if you're the person who's produced something that's deemed to be child pornography, then you're in trouble with a number of different federal and state laws, and so MTV could cancel the show tomorrow, and they still might be in some sort of trouble as a result of this.
So let's talk about this, because child pornography, like any pornography, is very subjective. Any obscenity standard is very subjective. And clearly, if they're not graphically displaying nudity, it's a very tough case to prove. I happen to be an attorney, by the way, as well as a talk radio host. So I really know the obscenity cases very well. On the other hand, I looked at the trailer video, and it's clear to me that even if the line against child pornography is not crossed, the very suggestive way in which the camera caresses these young girls and boys suggests to me the same kind of filming as a porn movie.
Yeah, I would agree, and also just another point on that is that we haven't seen this film, but we're told, and I believe it's the New York Times who first reported from somebody inside MTV's offices that the third episode, which they just aired the first, so the third episode has some full-on nudity with some of the under 18 characters, and in that episode in particular, the executives there were concerned that they might need to tone down or be across the line, and so it's beyond just the trailer and what you've seen so far, it's planning to get worse along that line.
I'm not going to really be watching the show, except for the fact that I probably need to watch at least one episode if I'm going to comment on it, because it's the right thing to do, to digest it myself before I have an opinion on it. But I remember there's a very sort of famous stories of the Supreme Court when they were deciding obscenity cases before they came to their final word on the subject. They ended up having to view a lot of porn films because they were talking about the subjective nature, and they were getting all these obscenity cases all the time, and they threw up their hands. They found it extremely distasteful. I would find it extremely distasteful to have to view this entire episode, because to me, all I would be able to see was the exploitation of the young people. I wouldn't be able to get past it. But I know that it was very popular in Britain. So talk to me about why you think the community standards here are different than in Britain.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I mean, there seems to be consensus that they certainly are different, and I'm not quite sure, why that is. Why the United States, I guess, historically has had a bit more of, I don't know, some people would call it puritanical view towards sexual content in society, and that still remains the case. There's certainly something there, and that our society at large is more concerned about this sort of thing than they are in Britain and in a lot of other countries.
If you don't get anywhere with Congress, are you going to try and contact the sponsors and make them aware of what it is they may be putting their money towards?
Oh yeah, we are definitely contacting the sponsors. We've already contacted the sponsors of the first episode. We had Taco Bell yesterday agreed to pull their sponsorship.
Was that as a result of your efforts?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Well, I commend you for those efforts, because I'll tell you what, Gavin, I really believe that since this is all done to make money to begin with, who are we kidding, that the only thing they ever listen to is when their pocketbook is affected.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Without question, and there's if this doesn't cross the line over child pornography, and like you said, that's a subjective question. Regardless of whether it does or it doesn't, if companies want to associate their brand with this, then the public and those who consume their products and wares need to let them know that, all right, well, you're paying for this to be on TV, and I now associate General Motors with something that is borderline, if not over the line, child pornography. What
about the fact that they themselves have given this a TVMA rating, and yet they are advertising it on all kind of teen sites and brag about the fact that over 1 million viewers were actually young adolescents?
Yeah, MTV, unfortunately, it's not that surprising, but that MTV has been extremely hypocritical in the run-up to this show, that they've, publicly said to critics, well, yes, we've rated it for adults, and this is, for mature audiences, and this is not intended to be kids. And yet they have an entire marketing campaign centered around the website teen.com and a number of other platforms that are geared towards high school and junior high school kids. When they tout their ratings, like you said, they start with the age 12. And the producer and creator did an interview last week, I believe it was the site Media Week, I might be mistaken there, where he talks in a video interview about how this show will deliver the youth audience to advertisers, which of course is a very valuable audience to be reaching for most products. So, what they're saying out of one side of their mouth does not at all match with what they're doing out of the other side of their mouth and with their marketing dollars.
You're the Parents Television Council. By the way, I have a question to ask you. My program director wanted to know, is this the same organization that was founded by Steve Allen and Jane Meadows?
Steve Allen and Brent Bizzell were they founded this back in the 90s, and this is the same organization. And
so tell me, what are the kinds of trends that you've seen because I've actually been keeping up with your reports and read them to my audience from time to time, but what are the kind of trends that you've been seeing with respect to monitoring the instances of what you would deem to be objectionable displays with respect to our youth on the air?
Well, unfortunately, we're seeing a growing amount of these types of displays. Our most recent study, which was released in December, was called Tinseltown's Newest Target, and it was centered around exactly what you're talking about, and specifically on the objectification and sexualization of young women in television. And we looked at the top shows that kids are watching, on broadcast TV, and found an overwhelming amount of sexual content and objectification of young women, and we're seeing this more and more, and becoming more and more acceptable in our media. That the female characters, and the younger ones even more than the 20-somethings and 30-somethings, the younger ones are being viewed and used as sexual objects, and there certainly would appear to be many possible ramifications in the society at large for that. It's a disturbing trend.
Our telephone number is 203-845-3044. If you have a comment, we'll open the phones now. We're talking with a representative of the Parents Television Council, and I know that there are a lot of people on different sides of the issue about this. There's there's always a concern when an organization wants to censor, and that's the word that is very commonly used, the kind of programming. So what would your response be to that argument that simply there should be no censorship, that actually it's the job and duty of a parent to watch their teens, and who cares what's on television anyway, you can always shut the thing off?
Well, you touched on a couple issues there. One, first of all, the idea that, I can just shut it off. Well, certainly, and we certainly don't discount the fact that parents are should be the first, second, and third line of defense for their children and their family to make sure what's appropriate. But at the same time, there are your kid is going to be going to school and be in a society that's affected by those who've been a part of this media society, and you can't just shield them and have them grow up in a bubble. In addition, everybody, anybody who has cable is paying for MTV. You pay for it through your cable bill, and a specific amount goes towards MTV, which means even though I block it at home, and so my kids don't end up seeing it, I am paying for it, and I'm giving money towards their marketing budget.
So you resent it?
I'm sorry? Yeah, I do it. I don't think there's any other market in the United States that works that way. If you went to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk, they wouldn't force you to buy Hustler magazine because they'd go out of business by doing that.
I got you.
Go across the street, but you can't do that with cable, which is why we've been pushing for the idea of cable choice to break that up, where you should be able to pick and choose to some degree of what you're getting.
Well, one of the things that I said also is that if something is TVMA, maybe it should just always be pay-per-view, which actually does put up a barrier, and it is harder for kids to get, it's different when you have to pay for something. So
yeah, there's a time and place for things. And you're not going to see the Parents Television Council speaking out about shows on HBO and Showtime because, like you said, you paid extra.
Yep.
You've taken a responsibility by doing that.
Yes.
And it's they're clearly marketed as adult, no holds barred networks, and you're taking on an extra responsibility as a parent by bringing that into your home. When I bring cable into my home, I do it because I like to watch baseball. I like to watch the occasional news show, and my kids like to watch, Rudolph at Christmas time and get things on the Disney Channel. And so there's a number of things I like, and that, sure, I could probably live without them, but I like to have those, but I don't want to have to pay for this other stuff.
One of the listeners wants to know, what are some other shows recently that you find objectionable that you've gone after?
Well, let's see. We've gone after the shows. Excuse me, sorry. Family Guy is a show that American Dad are shows that we've gone after in big part, not just because of the content of these shows, which is incredibly offensive to most people and pushes a lot of barriers, but also because it's a cartoon, it's marketed to children, and so that sort of moves things. All other things being equal, that sort of moves it up the ladder of our worst of type list. Another show, 2.5 Men on CBS, is another show that we've had a lot of problems with. And
2.5 Men is considered, or not considered, I think it is one of the most popular hits in Hollywood, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very popular show.
So what do you object to 2.5 Men? Tell me specifically.
Well, I don't have a...
because of his lifestyle that he brags about and jokes about, or... Yeah,
there's constant jokes and references and scenes involving, adult material, which there's a time and place for. If this show was on at, 10 o'clock at night, as opposed to 8 o'clock, we would probably have a lot less to say about it. It also has a young character. The boy's now probably in high school, so because the show's been on for a while.
Right.
But, you have a minor as one of the characters who is a party to all of this, and so. We also take into account when things are aired, and because shows that come on at 10 or 11 o'clock don't move up our hit list, so to speak, as quickly as shows that are on earlier.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. I want to thank you very much for bringing this particular show to my attention, because I would not have known of it, and it would have been something I would have inevitably sat down with my daughter, who would have been perusing the channels, and I would have said, what is that on television? What are you watching? So I honestly hope that this campaign is successful. I can't speak to the other shows. I don't really have much of an opinion about them, but what I saw for this one tells me that this is not the kind of thing that our kids should be exposed to, and they shouldn't be advertised to. And I hope that MTV gets a deserved slap on the wrist and pulls it. But we'll see what happens. This is America. Who knows? Thank you very much for being on the show.